I'd like to take a moment to introduce our guests, first of all. We have, in no particular order, Pippa Hayling, who is representing the Lib Dems as their prospective parliamentary candidate. Pippa has spent a working life forming environmental policy, is also chair of the Climate Change and Environment Advisory Committee on South Cambs District Council. So welcome to Pippa. We also have alongside Pippa Oliver Fisher, who is the parliamentary candidate, prospective parliamentary candidate for the Greens. He's also parish councillor for Teversham and works for a large tech company and describes himself as passionate about social injustice and environmental issues. Beside Oliver, we have Chris Cartid-Chapman, who is the candidate for the Conservatives, until recently a commercial director of a large global events company. Former candidate as well in the 2015 and 2017 general elections. And alongside Chris, we have Luke Viner, who this evening will be representing the Labour Party in the absence of a prospective parliamentary candidate to date. But he is also chair of the South Cambridgeshire Labour Party and a full-born parish councillor. So put your hands together for our candidate. All of whom will be very happy to answer your questions in the second half, particularly of tonight's event. It's up to me to just give you an idea of the format. So the way that it will work is in a moment's time, the candidates will have a chance to share their stance on the proposed route as it stands for the Camborne to Cambridge C2C busway. So that will be the first question posed to the candidates. Then we'll look at questions which were sent in, maybe by some people in the audience at the point where you reserved your tickets, and then we'll open the floor to your questions in the room. So hopefully, if we're very quick and everyone's concise, we should be able to get through as many questions as possible between now and 9 o'clock when we bid you farewell. To introduce myself, for those who don't know, my name is Jeremy Salis. Until very recently, a former BBC presenter of some 20 years. This was my day job, grilling candidates like today. I now run a media trading company, Salis Media, which helps people to feel less terrified about doing this sort of thing. However, it's my job to instill terror in these guests this evening, none of whom are my clients. Maybe I'll sign them up afterwards. We'll see how they go. But with your help, I'm here to help the event run smoothly. We want it to be, I know the organisers want it to be constructive, convivial, but also informative. I'm not an authority on this subject. I've obviously researched it heavily, but I may call upon some experts in the room if there are particular sort of bones of contention that need sort of fact-checking. I'm completely impartial. I really want to stress that. My opinion is irrelevant. However, in the absence of the Greater Cambridge Partnership tonight, the GCP, I will occasionally be playing devil's advocate. But please do not confuse that line of questioning with an expression of opinion on my part. It is not. It's just me being devil's advocate. So, without further ado, let's get into it. If you have working microphones or just want to use the voice that you were given, I'll start with Pippa, if I may. Are you for or against the C2C Camborne to Cambridge route as proposed by the GCP and approved by county councillors by votes of 33 to 26 on the 21st of March 23. So are you for or against the route as it stands today?
Well, hello everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to this important event this evening. And first of all, I just want to really acknowledge the concern and shared concern in the room and passion, I think, for our villages, for our environment, for public transport, social justice, but also for local people's voice to be heard in decision making. As we saw in the film there, and as I understand and believe it, nobody in this room is against high quality public transport between Camborne and Cambridge. The need for that, particularly when we're looking at protecting our villages and the areas around them and the character of South Cambridgeshire in particular, is that any new settlements that we have with the growth that has already happened is in settlements beyond our villages. And therefore them to be able to link through to all of the things they need to access, there has to be that connectivity. The existing families in Camborne, around 11,000 at the moment, have no safe cycle travel at all into Cambridge. They've got about a 3-hour journey for the kids. I've talked to Coton Village College that says at the moment the lack of public transport for those young people in Camborne is affecting their future decisions, their access, if they don't have access to lifts or the taxi fare, to their post-16 futures, either colleges of their choice or apprenticeships. And this day and age, in the places where we live, transport should not be a barrier to the future of those 16-year-olds. So it's not here, I don't think, a question of whether. I think the need, the urgent need for that transport link means that this should not be a political football anymore. It's gone on too long. What we do need is what I've been passionate about all my life, which is balance. And I've been in my working life and my political life, that's been, James Littlewood, CPPF is here, knows that it's this balance in how do we get environment high in decision making, in the difficult decisions we're going to have to make. And I think there are two things that I want to say this evening, and we can follow them up further in the questions. Firstly, it's about this environmental weight in decision making that I hear the frustration in the film and in all of your campaigns as well about what you see as the perceived lack of weight of that in decision making. And since I was elected in 2018, I was shocked to see in the local plan that was just adopted the lack of real teeth and weight in terms of climate, environment and water in decision making. And so we've worked to change that. The second is voice, and there have been 4 consultations around this busway, including the environmental impact assessment consultation. But there's such huge controversy that in answer to your question, I am calling for a full public inquiry by the Secretary of State.
Pippa, I have to draw you to a close and try and keep answers to 3 minutes for this section if we may, but to clarify, it's a simple question, are you for or against the route as it stands?
Well, as I say, it isn't between that. I think it's the difference between the offers that are on the table, which is, do we have a shorter term interim, what is proposed, which is on-road, or is this a longer term infrastructure for 50 years, given other contexts with East-West Rail, potential light rail? I think we're looking at, we need that full public inquiry.
If there was a vote tomorrow, would you vote for as it stands?
I don't think we've got enough information on the table to vote yeah, I think we don't.
Oliver Fisher for the Greens, would you vote for or against the route as it stands?
I would vote against it. Sorry. I'm supportive of public transport. You know, I am supportive of a route, but the route as it stands, you know, cutting across green fields, cutting through the orchard, it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. So, you know, it's an enormous investment. We need to put that money, you know, into the right route, and I just don't see it cutting across those green fields as being the right thing. So you know, I am supportive of large projects, large infrastructure projects, but they have to meet the long-term goals of decarbonisation. So, you know, I think it is a balance. I think we can't, you know, it's not you know, we have to have these types of projects because we need to deliver on public transport for our communities. But at the same time, we can't cut across green fields like this. So and destroy nature. So yeah, it's we've got to get it right. And you know, I live near to the busway on the other side of the city, so at Histon. I've used that busway, but actually I think the best thing about the busway is actually the cycle path that runs alongside it. So, you know, if we could do something with the existing infrastructure, I think that has to be the way forward. So yeah.
Excellent. Oliver Fisher for the Greens. Chris Carter-Chapman for the Conservatives. For or against the route as it stands today?
Well, I'm 100% against, and we can and we must save Coton Orchard. I first visited the orchard many years ago as a child, and I was very pleased that it was actually one of the first visits after my selection as the parliamentary candidate last year. And I've been working to support the very many campaign groups that are doing such excellent work in combating the proposals and also highlighting the sheer madness behind the numbers. Now, we had some of the financial figures up on the board, but I do think that they are worth repeating. Cost-benefit ratio required for an infrastructure project of this magnitude is a minimum of 1. Ideally, you would want 2 to 4. This, on the most generous of assessments, scores 0.48, probably closer to 0.43. So that's £220 million worth of taxpayers' money, your money, that is going to be horribly wasted when there is a clear alternative that Cambridge past, present and future and others have proposed that saves 80%. So think about the difference in funding. Think about the amounts of money that we're talking about. Look at the environmental damage. Over 150 trees ripped out of the ground. Those trees take 40, 50, 60 years, as many of you will know, to reach the point of biodiversity that they are currently in. There's going to be multiple species of wildlife that are going to be endangered, some of them already threatened, and you're going to have disruption for years and years to come throughout this construction project. So there is a clear alternative. So it's not only an act of economic vandalism, it's an act of environmental vandalism as well. And I think the politics of this is important as well. All of the people on this stage here tonight are standing to be your next Member of Parliament, and they are also standing to represent political, well, not quite yet, but maybe soon. And are standing, certainly this bit is true, to represent political parties. So if we look at the votes that were cast to destroy Coton Orchard, all 22 Liberal Democrat councillors voted to concrete over the orchard, all 8 Labour councillors, and all 26 Conservative councillors voted against and to save the orchard. So whatever you're going to hear tonight, whatever you're going to hear between now and the general election, and all of those leaflets you're going to get through your doors with fantastic bar charts on them telling you they've already got 300% of the vote, you don't need to bother. Don't believe any of it. Remember the reality of votes like the ones we have seen on C2C. How am I doing for minutes? 30 seconds. Rupert Brooke. Rupert Brooke, in his 1912 poem, From the Vicarage, Grantchester, talks about Coton, this beautiful green space, how we as stewards have got to preserve it. If I'm elected as your next Member of Parliament, I will absolutely ensure that this orchard is preserved for generations to come and is not lost so needlessly as it is going to be if the GCP get their way.
Chris Carter Chapman, thank you. Tempted to say congratulations, Luke, I won't. Luke Viner, who's here representing the Labour Party. So are you for or against the C2C route as it stands today?
I will answer your question. I just want to give a little bit of a spiel first, if that's okay.
Okay, you've got 3 minutes, so
that's
use them as you will.
Fantastic. So my name's Luke Viner. I'm the chair of South Cambridgeshire Labour Party. And I just want to thank everyone for coming here tonight more than anything. Thank you to Anna for showing me around the orchard last week, or 2 weeks ago, which was fantastic. I got to see everything there. And I've made the trip today from Fulbourn, which is where I live. I've lived there for about 5 years. It's a lovely village. I've just love everything about it. One thing though I don't really like about it, and it's shown quite a lot across South Cambridgeshire, is its public transport system. I mean, I live, 10-minute drive from the city, and it takes me about 50 minutes if I want to take the bus just to get into the city centre. It is just completely useless. And I have been, for a long time, at least ever since I joined the Labour Party, been advocating for a light rail system among the Cambridgeshire area, the Greater Cambridgeshire area, because I think that is a long-term project that we can actually achieve. The problem with trams and light rail, especially in the short term, is it's very expensive and it takes a long time to build. And unless you have the dedicated infrastructure in place, you can't do anything with it. Trams can't go on roads. They have to go on dedicated lines. So, in answer to your question, because I will get there, the main thing I wanted to find when I was looking at this and researching this myself was the scope and the availability to provide for a light rail system in Cambridge that could be built on top of or built or transformed into in the future. That was my big thing. And I've got repeated assurances that that is the case, and that is the whole point of it in the sense that we would have that dedicated infrastructure because we could move forward to have that. So knowing that that is the case, I would have voted for it because that's what I want to see. I want to see a move towards light rail, and I think this is a good way to at least start a conversation, put a piece of the puzzle in place where we can actually have that. And if it goes really well, which I genuinely believe it will, I'm not here to sit here and lie to you, I genuinely think this is the way I want to see things. And if that goes well, we can then start to roll that out to more villages, places like Fulbourn, Shelford, all that. We can get that interconnected transport system. The problem at the moment is it's very disjointed, and we need to start getting things done. This has been happening for 10 years now, at least this specific project, and we're still going through the last bit of consultation. I know that Pippa mentioned wanting to see a public inquiry. There will be a public inquiry. That's the last piece of the puzzle. That will happen regardless. And it's right that that will happen. You know, it's right that there will be a public inquiry because people deserve to have a say. So that's basically where I stand at the moment.
Luke Viner for the Labour Party. We'll now start to dip into questions which were sent in at the moment of registration for tonight's event. And then we'll go to questions on the floor in about 20 minutes or so. There's plenty to keep us going. The first is from Elizabeth Spain, who simply asks the question, how will the candidates ensure that positive action for climate change and nature feature highly on their party's manifestos? Oliver, start with you.
Hi. Well, I guess as a Green, that's definitely going to be on our manifesto. So that is it's probably our number one priority. There are other things that the Greens are interested in. So obviously we're here tonight to talk about public transport. Also, Greens would be talking about social justice, things like that as well. Absolutely, that we would have that on our manifesto.
Okay, Pippa, same question to you. How do you ensure positive action on climate change and nature feature highly on your manifesto?
By getting in there and working on it. So I was in the Federal Working Policy Group for our party, so I have been part in making sure that our manifesto for 2019 and this coming one, I've been on both the natural environment and the climate emergency manifestos, because this has to be higher than anything in terms of our decision making. It has to be there, and so you've got to have the policies with teeth to make sure that happens. So I made sure that I put in the hours, put in there, and so that's how I've made sure, because I've helped write it.
Okay, Chris, same question to you.
So I think the first thing I would do on a local level is not concrete over the premier example of biodiversity in our area, as the Liberal Democrats and Labour would do. So that would be my local point on the manifesto. On our national manifesto, as many of you will know, we are, in terms of developed economies, leading the way in decarbonisation, and I want to see that continue. I'm very proud of the offshore wind farm capacity we have managed to develop within the UK, and I think that should go further. We need to continue to diversify our energy supply, not only for the planet, but also for security reasons, and we've seen that during the conflict in Ukraine. So there are some very serious energy challenges facing the country. I feel we have the plan for it nationally, but on a local level, we must preserve and save Coton Orchard.
Same question to Luke for the Labour Party.
So when it comes to things like the nature and that approach on things, I know that, for example, in this scheme there was a target, I think it's 20% biodiversity net gain target, and trying to make sure that we increase those habitats.
I think it was a minimum of 10, but
minimum 10,
ambition for 20 was
correct. And obviously that, we want to see those things increase within the local area, of course. I think on a more national scale, as everyone else has touched on it as well, one of our 5 missions is to turn on Great British Energy and to move more into renewable energy, reform the planning system, build more wind farms, solar farms, nuclear power plants, these sorts of things that we can actually get forward and reduce the emissions that we have currently going out. So it's kind of a whole package, but that's what we are pushing towards.
Okay, you mentioned building there. That takes us on to Terry Spencer's question, who asked, what is your position regarding the recent announcement by the government to build an extra 150,000 homes under the newly established Cambridge Delivery Group? Well, it's your party, Chris, so I'll let you answer that one first.
Very keen to give you the microphone just there. Well, I think we've seen quite an evolution in terms of this announcement. So obviously it started at 250,000 homes, I think, by 2040. It was then 150,000 homes by 2050, and now in the case for Cambridge, it's 100,000 homes. Now, locally, the target is just shy of 50,000 homes, so I suspect that by the time we get to the end of this process, it won't actually be very far away from what sits in the local plan as it stands. All of you know that the big challenge that we face, and it's why I have opposed that level of house building locally, is water. And the Bourne Development Airfield has been stopped in its tracks by a lack of water. It's also impacting C2C, which is actually a positive because it gives us more time to fight it and combat it. But we do not have, the Environment Agency have said to me, they think possibly enough water to sustain 9,000 new homes at the moment, nothing like the numbers that we're talking about.
We'll talk about water later, but you don't think the final number will be anywhere close to 150,000? Is that what you're saying?
Well, in the case of Cambridge, it's already dropping down to 100,000, so I think we're going to actually land somewhere in between where we are.
So what's a good number from your perspective?
I'm not going to set an arbitrary number here. I think we need to look at our local plans.
Give us a ballpark.
Well, a ballpark figure is the local plan is currently calling for 50,000. We, in our previous local plan, had just over 35,000, so I think there's probably a number somewhere in between those. Okay. But the key is affordable housing. That is the key, and then we must ensure that the percentage of the houses being built are truly affordable for key workers in this area.
Okay, Pippa, I'll mix it up here so we've got a decent...
Well, I just think this is cloud cuckoo land because, you know, if the numbers are dropping, there would be absolutely no need to create, just 2 weeks ago, the Cambridge Development Corporation and the Cambridge Growth Company and give them a few £1 million. And this is to create this great urban quarter. If we look at some lines on the map, if we're worried about something cutting across sort of the land that we've got here, one of the most likely areas for Michael Gove's urban quarter, which would make Coton a suburb of an urban quarter that is 4 times the size of Cambridge City. And that is looking at from the Cambridge Biomedical Centre to Great Shelford, from the Gogmagogs across to the M11, which just makes all of this look a little bit, you know, actually puts it into perspective. This is mad. The second thing that's mad about this is when I call for a full public inquiry, that is to give transparency and greater public confidence and public voice in the final decision, because there's been so much controversy and lack of legitimacy of what GCP has come back with as the findings. The Development Corporation takes the voice out of the planning authority, away from local people, into an imposed, centrally driven agenda for growth. The Cambridge Water Scarcity Group that finally was set up, after we asked for it for 2 years, has come up finally with the water solutions only for the objectively identified housing need number, which is now at 55,000, because we have already met the 2041 growth projections that were set in 2018. So we have to accommodate somehow. Part of that accommodation in the local plan, with local voice, is in some of these satellite settlements, protecting the character of our villages, which once again then means we have to look at connectivity somehow across that green belt in some way.
Okay, Oliver Fisher for the Greens. Your position on this announcement of 150,000 homes for in and around Cambridge?
It doesn't make any sense to me either. You know, we're talking about concreting over, you know, this stretch of land here near Coton, but 150,000 new homes. It's going to be incredibly challenging to find places for those 150,000 homes to go, and also, you know, it's just going to put so much pressure on the existing systems, whether that's, you know, systems of nature, but also the infrastructure that we have here that's probably, you know, stretched to its limits already. So I know 150,000 homes are not going to arrive, you know, in the next 2 years or 3 years. It's, you know, that we're talking about, you know, multiple decades before 150,000 new homes are built. But, you know, I think we have to do something about the infrastructure. The water scarcity is obviously a massive issue. So, you know, we may kind of run out of water by 2029. So, based on where we are at the moment, so you know, to build 150,000 new homes does seem very foolish.
Okay, we will focus on water. That's the next question coming up. I just want to pass the microphone to Luke, and I'll let the other candidates come back on this as well, because I'd like to add this element. And Chris touched upon it. You know, 150,000 homes for Cambridge. A lot of opposition to that, but we also do have a situation, particularly in central Cambridge, where where youngsters are moving away from family homes because they can't afford to live in the city. We've got people commuting vast distances from four corners of Cambridgeshire just to work in our shops and bars and cafes and keep the economy going, but they can't live anywhere near Cambridge. So how do we not build lots of homes but also deal with a housing crisis?
You have to build homes at the end of the day. You just have to.
So 150,000?
No, not 150,000. I think Michael Gove's plan is, for the best way of putting it, very misguided. I don't think it's the, I think a lot of the time as well, you see a lot of government intrusion into sort of local areas, and it's like actually local people and local communities and local councils will know their areas the best. Now, don't get me wrong, I will, humour me from a quick anecdote, but there is a massive housing crisis. I think everyone understands that. I mean, just from my own point of view, I grew up in a very weird situation where my parents, or my dad and my mum actually bought a house in the same street that my grandparents bought their house in. So it's like 3 generations of family all living in one street, all living in one street from different generations. When my grandparents bought their house, it was £3,500. Okay, this is a semi-detached 3-bedroom house. 1995, my parents bought their house there, same spec house, and it was 47,000. A bungalow recently that was built on that street, very small bungalow, about 2-bedroom bungalow, went on sale very recently in my street in the suburbs of where I grew up originally, which was Bristol, you can probably tell from my accent, was £300,000. So it's very difficult to even put into words how difficult it is to imagine myself even buying a home. And I feel like I live quite a nice, not comfortable, but decent life, and I still find it very difficult to even imagine the fact that I can buy a home. So we need to build more homes. We just have to. And it's good to see that there are developments happening, but it has to be sustainable, and obviously it has to work with the water scarcity and all those things we have there.
Okay. The other candidates, sorry, just like to finish that point.
Well, really, I was just mainly going to say, if you want to see affordable housing, you need to build affordable housing. You need to build amenities to make sure that you have for that housing. I have a friend for example, from Northstowe. There's barely anything there, and that's a massive problem. So there's lots of different things you need to do, and also build more council housing, because that is essential. We had so much council housing, it's all gone now. Cambridge City Labour are doing a very good job with council housing in the city, and we'd like to see that rolled out much more across the county.
Okay, would the other candidates like to come back on that point?
Well, as I said previously, the need for more affordable homes is absolutely critical. I think it's important here to recognise that we're talking in theory about this, where there's a lot of detail that we still need to see, and a lot of the plans need to be fleshed out. We're coming on to water soon, but that is the real Achilles heel for these proposals. You're 10 years away from the reservoir, the Fenland reservoir that you would need to sustain this. So what we can deal with is our current provision, how we're delivering affordable and council housing at the moment, where we're delivering infill housing, which is in keeping with the communities in which it's built architecturally, and that it's the right mix for that area and that the infrastructure is there to support it. What we're here talking about tonight isn't theoretical, that's a real decision. So when others are saying, well, we need an inquiry to look into that, well, what about the decision we can influence right now, which is whether or not this orchard is destroyed and all of the damage that will do? That is one of the key decisions that we need to keep focused on tonight. Housing is absolutely vital, but these proposals are a very, very long way off from becoming a reality, and I do not believe, and I'm happy to put it on record, I'm no longer on Michael Gove's Christmas card list. It's not going to happen in anything like the scale that has been released to the press.
Well, let's see unless you have any burning decisions on housing, move on to water, unless you want to let's move on to water. Because this comes from Ella Grieg, who says, many of Cambridgeshire's chalk streams fall within the South Cambs area. It's common knowledge that over-abstraction, illegal sewage dumping by water companies and pollution are killing off these precious habitats as well as the River Cam itself. Will you commit to ending over-abstraction, the rampant growth agenda that drives it, and put your weight behind the campaign to hold water companies to account if you were to be elected?
Yes, and I'm already doing it. So in 2019, I wrote to Michael Gove off the back of my motion, which was the motion to declare not only a climate emergency, but a nature emergency, an ecological emergency, one of the few councils to do that. And we were looking particularly at, in the new emerging local plan, normally what planners do is they say, if we're going to do a water study, the water study is on the design of new build, the water efficiency of new build. And we said that we just couldn't, because I'd had a fantastic mentoring and training by Cam Valley Forum, which is the group of all of the local people and citizens committed who've been monitoring themselves year in, year out the state of our chalk streams. And I understood that the River Cam, that we think is so beautiful and iconic, if actually we turned off from the Cambridge water treatment system, we turned the treated effluent pipe off, then it's very likely that all of the wildlife and habitat would die along the Cam because there wouldn't be enough flow to make it survive. And that we haven't had natural replenishment of our groundwater aquifers, the storage, the natural storage, for years now, no matter how much rainfall we've had over the winter period. So I then campaigned to make sure that we got a solution, because I saw that neither Cambridge Water nor Anglian Water were, because they've got the licences, were committing to reducing abstraction. So I said, we have to find a way to do this without increasing the groundwater abstraction. Secondly, I have been to talk to Anglian Water. I have visited the Grapham Reserve and the water treatment, and I visited Haslingfield sewage treatment system.
And what's,
My final...
May I ask, so what difference does that make?
So what it's made
we're
is...
still hearing headlines about
Yeah.
outrageous levels of sewage being dumped into our rivers, and we're still seeing our chalk streams horribly damaged.
What was my campaign? So basically I'd been asked to go and see a person, not only the chalk streams that have got sewage in them, but also in Haslingfield and Harston and Comberton, houses that had sewage bubbling up. On one house, up over their front doorstep and up in their back garden, with their child going to school saying, "Mum, I smell of shit."
In Hista as well.
Thank you. And so I went to see Haslingfield sewage works, and I went around the works, and when I saw, which is the storage, and there was about this much level to the top rim. So I said to the manager of Anglian Water, I said, "You don't have capacity, do you?" And he said, "Oh, it's only when it rains." I said, "But I've got the data from Cam Valley Forum. You now are taking over that monitoring and you've made it public, which is great. But actually, the minute it rains, this is going immediately into the brook. You haven't got the capacity. Have you put additional funding in your 5-year plan to increase the sewage capacity?" He said, "I can't tell you that. I will go away and find that out." And when he went away, he said, "No, we have now included in the next 5-year plan capacity to increase the storage for Haslingfield into our 5-year plan. And we hope that that will be approved." Another way of approving that is through the work that's been done around the safe bathing site designation. So my next challenge was, we have 5 chalk streams in South Cambs. In the UK, we have 80% of the chalk streams of the world. 5 of the chalk streams in South Cambs have small sewage treatment works at the head of them. Each of them have this situation, so each of them needs capacity. So my campaign has been, it's succeeded with one of them, it is now to increase the capacity through investment in all of them, and that should not need only a safe bathing designation to get it.
Okay.
And in terms of water abstraction, it was the 2019
we'll have to let
water
the other
study.
candidates say that. It's
The
been
water
a
study.
fair crack of the whip. Pippa, if you
Okay.
please let Oliver answer this question. About abstraction, about killing our chalk streams, what sort of pressure would you put on if elected?
So I think you know, for me, if I was in charge, I think I would love to renationalise the water companies. I think the current system just is not working. You know, I know that's like, it's easy for me to say that, and it's not easy to kind of make that happen. But I just
take on the massive debt that the water companies have accrued.
Well, perhaps they just have to go bust, right? And that can be written off, and we just take it back.
Yeah.
No, why does the taxpayer have to pay it? I mean, the companies will lose. The companies will just cease to exist. The shareholders will lose their money, and the banks can lose their money as well.
And the pensions.
Well, okay. But anyway, look, that's not gonna. It's not gonna happen, all right? So it's not gonna happen anytime soon. But you know, like what's clear as well is that we're not holding the companies to account now. So, you know, the regulation as it stands is not working. You know, we should fine the companies more. But the problem is then is still, you know, who gets hurt by that? You know, the companies will just put up their bills. So yeah, I just don't think the system works. And then in terms of the over-extraction, it comes back to the housing again. You know, if we're going to build more houses, and I think we have to build some houses, but maybe not 150,000, then we have to look at the building regulations that make those houses as water efficient as possible. That's really important. So we can't just keep building houses as they are and keep extracting water in the same way.
Okay, I'd like to get through a few more questions, if we may, before we hand over to the floor. So I don't think it's possible really to let everyone have a go, otherwise we'll be, unless you're really passionate about the topics we've covered.
I would very quickly just like to say,
brilliant.
obviously, I said earlier about political parties taking responsibility for their actions, and it is quite clear that we as a government have not done enough on sewage discharges. I get a lot of emails and letters about it. I have a chalk stream in the village next to mine, and I have seen the impact of it firsthand. That is why limitless fines have now been introduced for water companies. That is why all the fine money that's been collected since April last year is now being put directly into schemes that will alleviate sewage discharges into our waterways. I'm pushing to see some of it spent here. We haven't done well enough on this. I apologise for that. You know, I'm standing as a Conservative Member of Parliament. We have let people down on this, but we are absolutely addressing it, and it has been generations of underinvestment in our sewage system right across the political spectrum, but we're in charge at the moment and we've got to do better on it.
Okay, on water extraction and pressure on water companies.
I'll try and be as brief as I can. I mean, obviously, as we've probably heard already, and as everyone knows, you know, the water companies at the minute are in private hands, and that means they have CEOs, and that means they have a whole structure. You know, these CEOs get paid sometimes up to about £1 million salary, you know, and for that we get the privilege of having sewage in our rivers. And so that's a massive problem. So what we would do, and I believe the Labour Party would do, is we would make sure that if any CEO is putting sewage in the rivers purposely, they should be held criminally liable. Period. Point blank, done. Okay, that should be happening. Now, moving on from that, obviously there's another part of this as well, is making sure that the sewage doesn't get put in there in the first place. And I know at the moment that sewage companies or water companies do self-checking of their own outlets of the sewage. So it would be good if we could get an independent people in to be able to check that as well, or anything on top of that. But obviously, you know, moving on to the water bit, I'll be really, really brief. There's the Fenland Reservoir being built. That's not waiting until, I think it's 2039. And again, I mean, we can start a whole new conversation on that, on reforming the planning system, making it quicker and easier to build these sorts of things. And that goes on to another thing. So, yeah.
Okay, I think it's a wonderful opportunity now, really, to open questions up to the floor. You've been sitting so patiently, I imagine, champing at the bit to ask our candidates and representatives here questions. If you'd like to put your hand up, and we'll put a microphone here. The gentleman at the back there with the glasses was the first to raise his hand. We have a microphone if you'd like to wait. So
Turning on the third microphone at this end, so can you try it now and see if it works?
Hello? Working?
Given the problems we've seen recently at the GCP and the Combined Authority and the multiple proposals for unitary authorities in Cambridgeshire, do you have any thoughts on local government reform? And if elected, what will you do to bring about any plans you might support?
Are you happy for me to start? Yes, I do. We should abolish the GCP. So the GCP has completely lost its way, is wasting vast sums of money. I understand that £14 million, 1/4, that is 14 million, has been spent on consultants as part of the C2C busway project. That's a gross waste of money. I would like to see them lose the £200 million worth of gateway funding that's currently going through the works, and I'd like to see that money spent on a feasibility study for light rail in Cambridge. The GCP needs to end. I'm very supportive and interested in ideas to streamline local government. I was with a group of residents the other day who said, can you just take me through exactly how it works? So I tried to draw them a diagram with parish councils, district councils, county councils, the combined authority, the GCP, the mayor's powers that sort of spill out all over the place. and they were lost after we got to district council, and I think so was I. So we need fewer tiers of government, it'll be better value for taxpayers, and you'll get better decisions from your representatives.
Can I just ask as well, the murmuring sounded popular about abolishing the GCP, but the government gave Cambridge and the surrounding area £500 million. Do you think if you abolished it, then you'd take away any faith that they may have in the future to give money to Cambridge?
No, so I think we can make an extremely, and I have made an extremely strong case to central government that this money is being misused on a very gross scale. And when you talk to the GCP about transport solutions, do you try to talk to them about rail? They just sort of glaze over and say, oh, we're very good at busways. Well, I think Coton shows they're not.
Okay, Oliver, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, I have to say I'm kind of on the same page as Chris actually on this. So yeah, I'm not.
It's more entertaining if you argue, but well,
It's an unlikely coalition.
Yeah, I'm definitely not for wasting money. Yeah, absolutely. Let's spend the money in the most sensible way. Let's have local government that's accountable and efficient and gets things done and gets things done for the community. That's here. Grand schemes that spend £14 million on consultants. That's not what I want. So.
okay.
Yeah, I'd like bigger money. I've been looking at Cardiff. Cardiff took 14 years to be able to work out how it would work out its mass transit system and the connectivity with one of the fastest growing, it's called the City of Innovation of the UK. So it's gone from a very small city that wasn't designed to be a bigger city to now the fastest growing with 20% growth per year. And it's taken 14 years to try and work out, and what it's worked out is it has to have real combination of different travel options, which include light rail, which do include busways, which do include...
In relation to the democratic structure of this area.
So the democratic structure, and that is delivered through the councils. Now, I liked Chris's kind of characterisation, which is why the Conservatives have put on top of that the Cambridge Development Corporation and the Cambridge Growth Company, which are not at all... don't have to respond to local voices or local planning at all. It's bringing in turbocharging Cambridge with supra planners. So, you're just adding a few layers on there, Chris. The second thing I really do think we need to look at the governance here. I do think we need to look at the governance structures. I wouldn't abolish...
So you looked at it, what would you do?
So... Well, I think I'd actually like to go to these sessions, but looking kind of unitaries and see whether we do the unitaries or not. I'm not sure I'm convinced about mayoralties, but some form of unitary I think is very interesting. We should be looking at it. We have far too many layers. I agree with that. So I wouldn't answer it by putting layers on top. That would be my way. And in terms of finally on the GCP,
very quickly.
Very quickly. Can I just ask Chris at a later question? Perhaps would be, as I understand it, the on-road option, designed by Edward Lee, substantiated by Edward Lee's report, says that this would be an interim solution before East-West Rail comes in. As I understand it, Chris, you're against East-West Rail. So I'd like to know how the on-road option that would then depend on East-West Rail is compatible with your position.
Well, let's let the audience ask the questions first, and I'll just let Luke just field that question about the structure, governance, GCP.
Well, it's actually quite funny. I mean, last year I was applying for a few jobs, and one of the things you can do when you apply for new jobs, sometimes they ask you to do a presentation. And because I'm sad, I decided to do it on the structures of local government and explaining it to people. and they were rightfully very confused. And it is absolutely crazy. I mean, the amount of people we elect, just in the first scope of it, is crazy. Then you have all the other unelected things on top of that as well. I think there is absolutely scope for changing that. I'm not wedded to a solution. I won't lie. I'm very happy to. I know a couple of people who are really passionate about the unitaries. I mean, I originally, like I said, from north of a suburb of Bristol. That's where I grew up. We have a unitary authority there, South Gloucestershire, and that seems to work quite nicely and quite well. And it gives them all the same powers just under one umbrella. It makes things a little bit easier to do the interconnectivity. So yeah, I think it's something that we can absolutely look towards doing, but obviously, much like everything in life, the devil's in the details, so we'd have to see how it works. But it would have to go through an act of Parliament to change that. So,
do we have a question on East-West Rail from anybody? Okay, yes, gentleman at the back.
First of all, thanks very much for coming out. We really do appreciate it. So the question is very simple. What do you think about East-West Rail, both the principle and the proposed route?
So if I may start there. So Pippa has slightly mischaracterised, actually rather majorly mischaracterised my position on East West Rail. Reminds me of those leaflets we're all getting through our doors at the moment with the bar charts. So I am opposed to the southern approach of East West Rail, to be very clear, which is the one that would run through and do so much damage to Haslingfield, Harston, the Everstons, Combatant Toft, that route, to absolutely no benefit to the South Cambs constituency whatsoever. We don't get a single new station, and when I sat down for my first meeting with East West Rail, they opened this big book in front of me and said, we're now going to show you all of the benefits you will get. And they looked down and turned to the person next to say, he doesn't get any. And we're the only constituency where there is zero benefit or the pain. Now, I understand from the hustings we had earlier on in the year, Pippa, that you would support the southern approach if it was electrified, I think is how you finished. So that would be 2 swathes of South Cambridgeshire that the Liberal Democrats would concrete over and do massive environmental damage with huge carbon emissions for very little benefit at huge cost. And we talked about cost-benefit ratios earlier and how poor it was for C2C. East West Rails is 0.25. It is absolutely staggeringly bad. I've done a lot of work on this. I'm meeting with the residents of Harston again next week in their rail working group. I've written to the government, I'm working with ministers, and I think slowly we're making progress on really opening some eyes as to the 2 routes and their merits. The northern approach will link up with Northstowe, you'll get your connectivity. The people of Camborne will quite rightly get their connectivity. So the bus route, in relation to the northern approach, they are both 100% compatible.
Okay, can I'll let Pippa respond to the comments that you'd be in support of 2 very destructive projects through South Cambridgeshire?
So as Chris knows, we were about the thing, and I do question the business case for East West Rail. If the business case is justified, the fact that it's not electrified means that I could not support the southern route at all, because the amount of damage it would do for diesel is just incalculable. I just couldn't, it's just unconscionable.
But it is likely to be electrified, so would you then support it?
So if it was electrified, it would mean that the whole design of it would be very, very different.
So that's a yes.
So I've talked to it, yes. But as long as there were local benefits to local communities coming in, that's why I think we should look at a local station. And I know that there are some people in Harston also that are interested in that local station. I do also know that for the connectivity, as we've talked about it for Cambridge to Camborne and future light rail options, they are also looking at that connectivity. So the light rail that you were talking about does look at building on those East West Rail options too.
Okay, Oliver and Luke to answer this question. And in the context of the GCP, if they were here, they would say that East West Rail complements the C2C because it comes in the south of the city, whereas the C2C comes in at the west. We heard on the video we watched earlier that East West Rail, the argument is it makes C2C redundant. So your thoughts on East West Rail?
Yeah, so obviously I am supportive of rail, and my understanding is that this railway line is particularly good for freight, moving freight around. I'm not, in terms of a route, I guess I'm not that very supportive of a southern route if there's no benefit to the communities here. So I think it has to, there has to be stations in the southern part of the southern part of the route. But yeah, I'm not as familiar with the details of the East West Rail as maybe the Coton route.
Okay, Luke Finer for the Labour Party.
Thank you. The rail system around here is very much like everything else, quite poor, quite a mess, and I do find it quite ludicrous that at the minute, just to get from here to anywhere really around the country, you have to go through London. It's crazy to me. Now, in terms of East West Rail, I've always been a very passionate advocate for if we're going to have things built, big infrastructure projects, which will need to happen, that local residents along certain lines do get benefit from that. And the fact that there is no station between Camborne and Cambridge South, I do find to be very confusing. If you're going to have a whole load of embankments near Harston, there should be a station near Harston. That just makes sense to me. I'm all for investment in that area. Now, obviously, there is, I believe, a consultation happening, or things like consultation, step-in meetings and all that happening in May or June, is it?
So I can say what it is.
June, yeah. So there will be. It's not finished yet. It's not finalised yet. There will be a lot of opportunities for you to go ahead and make your voices heard on what you want to see. I will be going along and saying we need stations, because if we can do that, then that is a fantastic route that I would support. And also, it also gives scope in as well I know that the Making Connections big brief from the GCP a long time ago wanted to move forward with the Cambridge East railway station as well, and there's a whole lot of good-looking things in that regard as well. So I think it can be a very good thing, but we just need to iron out the details a lot more. And also the diesel aspect isn't great either.
Okay. Question? Yes.
Hello, good evening. My name is Catherine Morris and I'm here to represent the Save Honey Hill campaign, which is all about the relocation of Anglian Water's sewage works at Cowley Road to Greenbelt, arable farmland between the villages of Horningsea and Fenditton, which also incidentally is a major, or principal rather, chalk aquifer. We're talking groundwater, and they want to concrete over it. So on the matter of the wastewater treatment plant relocation and the core site, which forms part of the North East Cambridge Area Action Plan, we now know from the master developers that they plan to up the commercial and R&D space from what was around 20,000 square metres to 93,000 square metres without increasing the number of homes. How does this help the housing crisis in Cambridge? And does it justify the taxpayer paying Anglian Water what is now gone up to £277 million to shift its recently modernised sewage plant to Honey Hill?
No, it absolutely does not. So I have been a very vocal supporter of the Save Honey Hill campaign, and again, it was one of the first meetings that I took when I was elected last year. I've sat on a planning committee for many years in London with some very complex planning cases, and I've never seen one quite as bizarre as this one. And the barrister who's representing the Honey Hill group puts it much better than I, but essentially, by demolishing a perfectly functioning sewage works, you then designate it as a brownfield site, and then you can build houses on it. Which is extraordinary. It has been upgraded, it has many, many decades of life left ahead of it. There are much better alternative sites for those houses to go. I think Milton probably led the pack, was a more suitable location without the loss of prime arable land that we cannot afford to lose at huge, unbelievably huge cost, as was mentioned there. Again, I think, don't have the CBR to hand, but it's another shocker. And we are just beset by infrastructure projects that are being driven by unaccountable local representatives and politicians across the constituency. We haven't even got on to CSET that will decimate the Gogmagogs. There's another example of another busway that is not supported by the public, and a consultation where the vast majority of people said we do not want it here, but they managed to split the results in such a way as to make it look like that was the preferred option. There's a terrible democratic deficit going on locally. We've got to stand up to it, and I would absolutely fight to save Honey Hill.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, we shouldn't move the sewage works. It makes no sense whatsoever. What I don't understand, though, is who wants this to happen? You know, it's spending taxpayers' money. The government is spending taxpayers' money to make this happen. If the government just changed their mind, then it won't happen, will it? I mean, where does the money come from if they turn the tap off? So, yeah, quite literally.
It's a local decision on the location.
I think the university has an awful lot to do with it.
Yes.
But the money's coming from central government, is it?
Yes. Yes, it's central government decision.
It's a central government decision.
Yes.
Okay, so then
The site was driven locally.
I don't. Okay, but maybe by the university.
Sorry, would you like to add to this point?
Yes,
Yes, lady there.
Yes, I think I'd like to add, people find it very strange, particularly on the Honey Hill situations. I mean, I'd like to pick up Luke on a comment he made about, making CEOs of water companies address issues personally, because City Council is the development partner of Anglian Water, who's one of the UK's worst polluters. And the North East Cambridge, the plans for relocation of the sewage site treatment works to Honey Hill, to Greenbelt, and to conservation villages is development partners on this are Cambridge City Council, Cambridge University, Anglian Water, and Landsec, who are the UK's biggest property developer, and cited by Gove in his plans for Cambridge. So, I mean, perhaps you could comment on that. I don't want to sort of pick you up on this, but, it does seem very strange that, all these, and also what seems strange is that it would seem that Labour City Council is saying that it's nothing to do with them, and yet we've got central government saying this is a Gove's plans, and we're not quite clear who is driving what.
Luke?
Is it the council, the university, government, who?
I would just say I'm not 100% well versed in the internal affairs of Cambridge City Council, as maybe we'd like them to be at the time. But
But it has been Labour run for
it has been
a
Labour
long
run,
time.
absolutely yes. And I will make a quick comment on Honey Hill. I mean, it's in my neck of the woods, and I guess in my ward, because I ran for district council in 2022. So it's obviously a very big issue back then as well. I think the way that they were trying to do it, as I think was said, was the sewage works that is currently north of Cambridge would be gotten rid of, and there would be a scope then to put housing there, which is, is all good, well and good to have housing. The problem is, I believe, over there is if you got rid of that sewage works and called it brown belt land, there's still apparently the scope that the land below it would still be so polluted that you wouldn't even be able to put houses there anyway. And that just makes me think, well, if you can't do that anyway, why are you moving the sewage works in the first place? There's no point in it, just leave it where it is, especially if it's got a good shelf life. So, absolutely on that regard. Again, in terms of the intricacies of Cambridge City Council, I honestly
just comment on the fact that Cambridge City Council is a major beneficiary because they're a landowner. They are going to make a lot of money out of it. This is featured on CoStar real estate site as the deal will make $3 billion. Wow.
Well, I'd have to look into it. I honestly, I would. I don't want to start spreading a whole load of things that I'm not as well versed in, because that wouldn't be fair on my colleagues in the city, and it wouldn't be fair on myself. But in terms of, I think you obviously mentioned housing, and a lot of housing that's going to be happening in Cambridge. I am very proud of the fact that Cambridge City Council, after Birmingham, is the highest amount produces the highest amount of council homes, and
but
we do need to be driving things.
They are quadrupling the R&D commercial space on that site. They're not quadrupling the housing, they're quadrupling. And who's going to be wanting to rent or buy that space?
Well,
and it's bang next door to St John's Innovation, and just across the road from the science.
Yeah, because I work in that area. That's where I actually that's where I work and have done for the past couple of months now. So yes, I mean, we do need to obviously increase the amount of space there is for jobs and for employment, of course, and obviously that will then be done in consultation with local people, hopefully, and will also be done hopefully in a sustainable way. I do want to see that. Again, I'm not as well versed in it as I need to look into, but I will absolutely. Oh yeah, and I'd love to talk to you more about it afterwards, if that's okay as well. Maybe get some additional details.
Pippa, get a chance to talk about the relocation of the Cambridge treatment sewage works.
No, so I want to address exactly what you said, which is the change of scope and spec for that, which is going to lab space, and I think we absolutely need to work out what's happening with that, and I think that needs to be examined very, very carefully as the planning application goes through, because it's a change completely to what the whole design was initially. What we've been doing in the emerging local plan is to say, how do you address nature protection, village protection, climate protection, and address the growth that is happening, and the fact that we are one of the, this is going to be and is the centre of the life sciences and globally. So what we've looked at doing in the emerging local plan is that you have agglomeration, so you bring the research parks together, and what we've said is you don't have housing following employment. You work out where that goes, which is what we've been doing in the emerging local plan with the strategic sites, so that where you have the employment and housing, it is designed together. What I'm worried about with what you're saying right now about these new plans is that you're going to have attendant housing that isn't planned for within that area. So I think we've got to really seriously look at it. There's been a change of spec to what's being put forward in that planning application. Has to be examined.
And is this the local plan that doesn't even mention the fact that the sewage works, they're wanting to move it to Greenbelt?
So the emerging local plan has those in it. The existing local plan doesn't at the moment, you're right.
But you said it was so important for everything, for climate change and our environment to be the number one thing that drives absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And you're proposing to demolish a sewage plant that functions. I'm hearing water say there is absolutely no operational need to move it. And to move it and build one the size of Wembley, the carbon cost is astronomical. A tunnel 20 metres deep under the River Cam.
It's only a mile away as well.
It is a bonkers scheme in terms of the environment and climate.
So I've been one of the ones that has questioned the carbon impact of the scheme, and they've had to look again at that, so that's what's been delayed. I think actually that, so since I've been elected, that was a decision that came in from central government as a national infrastructure project to move the works. It does allow within what is, if you looked at that, you'd say, well, that's actually a sustainable place to put more development there because you've got the public transport options. I'm also worried about the public space options around the number of housing that we're trying to put into the North East Cambridge development. But I think if you're looking at where you densify, that's not a bad place to densify. We have to find that balance.
But wouldn't it be important to match? I mean, at the moment you're causing a deficit potentially of tens of thousands of homes that you're going to be building, that massive commercial area first of all, and then where all those...
So that's what I'm saying, that has to be examined. So if it is not the lab space with the homes, which is what we're doing in the Bayborough Centre, with the Hingston and the Hawkston centres, as you'll see, we're doing almost like the Bourneville factory, where you've got tithed houses for local people and people who work there and key workers around the places, so they don't have to travel, which transport is the biggest carbon emitter of all of the things.
But shouldn't this be examined before they go into the relocation of the sewage plant?
Yeah.
Because, well,
Okay.
that's not going to happen that way around.
So we must move on to try and cover more topics and maybe get back to the C2C as well. Gentleman there at the back, we can get a microphone to you, sir. Yep, good one.
Yeah, thank you. Can I change the topic with the focus from local issues, which are very important, we're all here for the climate and its problems, but NHS. I heard some few years before COVID this was, that the three major parties are all in agreement that privatisation would be pursued. And Wes Streeting the other day was being interviewed, and he said that he hoped to get a cross-party agreement on the need to progress in that way. More and more of the NHS has been privatised and put out to various subsidiaries, and one of those investors is an American company, and the fear is that health NHS units, surgeries and so forth combine, and they get taken over by investor groups.
So what's your, sorry to rush you, but what's your question about further privatisation of the NHS?
Can the members of the panel there say, are they prepared to work towards stopping further privatisation and putting healthcare back into national hands and ensuring that it will be that way?
Okay, thank you for the question. Who would like to take that first? Yes, Chris.
Well, thank you for the question. You can have private company involvement in the NHS without privatising the NHS. Now, the NHS has received record funding from this government. It needs more. I think that's become acutely clear. We have huge backlogs still running post-COVID. But would I remove private company involvement when they play such an important role, particularly with certain procedures and conditions? No, I wouldn't. Now, some of you have read the coverage of my own experience at Addenbrooke's. I've sadly had to be there a lot due to various members of my family, but when my nephew was diagnosed with kidney cancer at the age of just 1, private companies provided some of the scanning technology that helped with his Wilms, a very rare type of tumour, and helped with his life-saving operation that we moved him from Addenbrooke's to Great Ormond Street for that. So would I have changed his health outcome by saying from an ideological perspective, we shouldn't allow private healthcare organisations to be involved? No, I wouldn't. So I think they play a key role. No one is talking about privatising the NHS. It is a national institution that we will cherish, and if I'm your Member of Parliament, I would seek to safeguard it.
Okay, Luke, from a Labour perspective?
Well, the National Health Service is Labour's greatest achievement, quite frankly. It just is. it is a system that says that no matter whether you're a man or woman, young and old, from any class, any background, any monetary point of view, you are able to get high quality treatment free at the point of use as a right of your birth within this country. And that should stay cast iron guarantee, that should never change. That is the way the NHS is set up, and that is how it should continue to set up. In terms of private capacity, I don't think there's anything wrong with using private capacity to bring NHS waiting lists down, especially in the temporary term, because they are massive at the moment. And I mean, just my own experience, I went to A&E last Sunday because I decided after 20 years to apparently test my peanut allergy. Accidentally had a bit of peanut paste from a protein bar. I was fine, but I was there probably, I think, for about 7 hours, just to be checked over. I got given a antihistamine, checked over, a couple of steroids and put on my way. But I was there for 7 hours. I was talking to other people there, obviously, as well. I try not to canvass them. But they're at the same time with other people, just, and you know, same experiences. They've been there for ages and ages and ages. There were lines all the way out the door. The system is broken, you know. And you have to remember, more than anything, the record, you know. Under the last Labour government, we had the highest satisfaction in the NHS ever. Okay, we had the lowest waiting times ever. You could get a guaranteed GP appointment within 48 hours.
You may get another opportunity, but what would you do? Would you stop further privatisation, as the gentleman sees?
We will not be privatising the NHS. We will absolutely not be privatising the NHS. There is nothing wrong with using private capacity to keep waiting this down in the short term. There is nothing wrong with that. At the end of the day, there are people that are using private capacity at the moment. The capacity is there. I'm not going to, from an ideological point of view, very similar to Chris, I'm not going to, from an ideological point of view, say, you're not allowed to get that treatment now because I don't believe you can use that private capacity. That's just wrong, in my opinion.
Okay, Oliver, for the Greens?
Yeah, I think the problem with the private capacity piece is that once it's sort of embedded, it's very hard to turn it off again. So I think, you know, it clearly is there now, but I think we need to invest. We need to invest more, and we need to, you know, there's obviously loads of things that can be done within the NHS that don't involve, you know, private companies getting involved. So yeah, lack of investment for the last 13 years. Obviously been a problem, and we've created a two-tier system where basically if you've got money you can bypass the system, and I'm just not sure that's where we want to be as a country. So yeah, I think the NHS is a wonderful institution, but it has, you know, hasn't been invested in for the last 13 years. So yeah.
The Lib Dems.
Yeah, absolutely. True to the principle of, you know, NHS for everyone, which is free at the point of use and of service. And I've been been at the conference of all of the GPs for the East of England, and then talked to the Cambridgeshire GPs. I've talked to the person who is leading the British Medical Association's GP committee in their negotiations with the government at the moment. The NHS is on its knees right now, and the people within it do have the answers, and they say they are not being listened to. The GPs have just held a referendum on the GP contract for 2024-2025. Over 90% of them have rejected it. And what they say, if they were going to reject it, is that they would do something they've never done before. And that is collective action by the GPs. Because they said the government is just not listening to them as the professionals, as those generalists, as those family medicine GPs who are there to be able to spot something in every one of us and refer. They say they're being designed out of general practice by this government. So I'm there supporting what's called their Rebuild General Practice campaign. When I talk to some of the GPs who've stopped becoming partners, they've given up being partners in their practices and become salaried GPs. They said there is a two-tier system already happening, and they found it very, very hard to deal with. The fact that in some areas which are affluent, you are able to go hop out of the system, get your private treatment, private scan, private first diagnosis, and come back into the NHS. That is then means that you then go ahead in the queue and you move forward. They have found that what they call now moral injury. So the staff within the NHS say that there is a real danger of a two-tier system which is leaving people behind, and they have the answers. Through my campaign, what I found in Cambridgeshire is that we have got the lowest amount per capita for primary healthcare spending out of all 42 healthcare systems in the country. That is not representation by your MP, and I would change that.
Okay, we're here, primarily the focus was on C2C, so I just want to make sure, are there any other questions relating to C2C in the room? Gentleman there in the red shirt.
Do you feel that the impetus towards the growth of Cambridge has just gone too far? It seems to me that the proposals for the city to grow, because it's going to become the biomedical hub for the world, is just almost and completely unrealistic. You wouldn't really want to start from here. I remember when Milton Keynes was developed, it was developed as a new city that would have exactly that. It would be a hub for people to live and work, and they would be able to travel easily within the city. We can't create that sort of system in Cambridge. And I'm just interested in the candidates saying, I'm asking them whether or not they would actually say to central government, you can't let the Treasury control the growth of Cambridge. They're so hungry for the income tax that they will get from all this growth. It just seems crazy to me to bolt this on to a relatively small city. And I just wonder if the time has come to say, enough is enough. We haven't got the infrastructure, we haven't got the water. Look elsewhere to create these hubs.
So what is your question? You say, would you stand up against their own party
I
in
think
national
so, yes,
government?
that's what I would say, ask, yes. Would they stand up for Cambridge and say, it's just mad to bolt on this much growth?
Even if that meant going against their own party government, say, Pippa?
Yes, and I think it's going to be, it's the current Conservative Party ambition to do that for Cambridge, to Cambridge. I think even if a Labour government came in, I think they would do the same, because it has proven that Cambridgeshire is a net contributor to the UK economy. So in an area when we don't have growth, we're flat-lining growth, this is one of the areas which is actually growing. So it is too tempting. So what I would say is, you don't do scorched earth policy, you don't do boom and bust. You cannot sustain that level of growth that is being projected. The work that has gone on to do the emerging local plan was to deal with growth that we have to accept has already happened. The 2018 projections, I'll say this again, what was projected in 2018 to be growth to 2041 has already been met. During COVID, we asked the planners to do another study because we thought growth wouldn't be going because we'd stalled, we got community changes, there had to be a change to that. What happened was it grew during COVID because of the life sciences applications. So I would say, no, we don't grow beyond our means, and our means principally are the utilities. It's water, but it's also electricity. We cannot, with the grid constraints at the moment, develop further beyond that, and the transport, and in the end, the homes that people can afford to live in. So with those, you cannot do that kind of growth without fixing those.
Okay, Oliver.
Yeah, I think I agree a lot with what Pippa's just said there. I think the city is probably growing too fast, and we just don't have the infrastructure. We are a small city, and it's very clear that we just don't have the infrastructure needed to keep growing in the way that we are. And perhaps what needs to happen is the infrastructure needs to be built, and then over time, the city can grow a bit more. Cambridge is a fantastic place to live and work, but lots of people can't live and work in the city. They have to live a long way away from the city and then commute in, and that's just not a sustainable. It's just not a sustainable thing. So I would love people to live and work in the city. Be able to commute, on electric buses or cycle to work, all of those things. But I know that's not the case for lots of people. So yeah, I agree.
Okay, Chris, the Conservatives.
So my answer to the question is I have done exactly that. And when it's the governing party and you're seeking to represent that party, that's difficult. But my primary objective is to be a constituency MP and an effective constituency MP. So I've made those points to central government. But there is a balance, as we said earlier. We are a huge source of employment is linked with, as you know, our status as a bio-hub globally. We compete with Boston, we compete with multiple other sites around the world. So what we need to see is more of that tax receipts spent here on sustainable infrastructure projects, not the infrastructure projects that we've been talking about tonight. So C2C, CSET, the Southern Approach for East West Rail and the Honey Hill redevelopment are all very, very bad infrastructure projects. They have very poor CBRs and don't serve local people. What we need to be doing is pushing government to put money into feasibility studies for sustainable transport systems, for better housing and for buses. And we can, and I think we will make progress.
So you pause the growth until you've got the ability to have it?
The growth is happening regardless. It's how we funnel and shape it. And there are policies that we can introduce, as we've talked about here tonight, that will shape it in a way that benefits residents and doesn't destroy the green belt in our local area. When I talk to central government about this, they are a little bit perplexed that local decision makers and the very many, even they admit, very many complicated tiers of government are pursuing some of these quite destructive route options when they expected to receive submissions from them. The Southern Approach for East West Rail is openly supported by other political parties locally. We have recently had that debate within the South Cambs Council Chamber, and they've put on record their support for something which we know from all the polling we've done, all the conversations we have, are deeply unpopular locally. So this is about listening to people. We can't just have growth from above, it has to be organic growth that local people are shaping.
Okay, Luke Viner for the Labour Party.
Yeah, I mean, kind of going on from that, I was kind of ended where I was going to start really, which was, these things can't always be dictated to by national government. We have a local, we spoke about the way that local authorities are structured around here, and it's not great, but we do have a local system of doing things. And I think any growth that does happen should be focused and done locally, with obviously consultation with residents and other things like that. I will quickly put a little point, Oliver made a very eloquent point about Cambridgeshire being a lovely place to live and work, and it's so true, it is. But if you want to grow up here and want to buy a house here and you've been here for generations, you don't have that opportunity because there's not enough housing. There just isn't. And I find that really upsetting because it does mean that people like myself usually, or a few other people who've been here for generations, have to go to places like Birmingham, or go to London, or go to York, or go to Liverpool, or anywhere else around the country, which means that they're away from their family roots. And I find that to be quite a depressing thing, to be honest. You did touch, obviously, Chris mentioned it as well, the growth is going to be happening. There are sites of growth that are going to be happening, and that's just going to happen. What matters is how we prepare for it. Are we going to go 10 years down the line going, goodness gracious, why didn't we build this then, or why didn't we do that then? Because the growth is going to happen, it's just how we move with it. I also think there's a very good conversation to be had as well on density. It's all very well and good spreading out, but is there any chance we can also spread up, especially in the centre of Cambridge? Maybe that would also possibly affect the aesthetics of the area, and we can obviously have that conversation, but it's definitely something worth talking about. I think that's pretty much all my little points.
Okay, I'm conscious of the time. I'm also conscious of how uncomfortable our guests feel sitting on these
I feel like I'm slumping.
We needed a back here, more of a back.
Now you know what Westlife have had to go for 20 years. Gentleman there in the glasses, yes?
So I'm quite interested in the future of Cambridge. It's an incredibly successful city in so many different ways. I mean, they even have Antarctic expeditions down in Cambridge. It seems an odd place to place it. And so, looking into the future, like London, most people commute into London, they can't afford to live there. And with Cambridge, we've got this East-West Railway. I was thinking, to what extent can we have more railways going to Norwich, going to whatever, bringing people who can live in houses that are more affordable into Cambridge and be able to work and then get home quickly. Any ideas for more railways?
I did mention earlier a few opening stations would be great. I know there's bless you, I've forgotten the name of the village of
Caston.
That's the one. That's going to be having one there. But there's also another railway station that they were trying to reopen as well.
Haverhill.
That's the one. Doing that would be fantastic. I mentioned earlier Cambridge East, getting something between Cherry Hinton and Fulbourn, which would be fantastic for the residents near where I live, and that surrounding area would be brilliant. I think we have to look at obviously sustainable ways to improve public transport, and we have to do something again that isn't necessarily a sticking plaster approach, but a real long-term solution. I'm all for rail. I think it's brilliant. It is possibly it's a British invention as well, quite frankly. We should be using more of it.
Excellent. If we can try and keep the answers concise and we can get through as many questions in the remaining 15 minutes.
Well, I think mine on railways can be very concise, in that I've pretty much nailed my cards to the mast of what I think about railway provision locally. It's not to say that when we explore the feasibility study for light rail further, that there isn't the opportunity to connect it around the city in various directions, exploring how you might link it up with Haverhill, using existing lines though, and that's the problem with East West Rail. A lot of people think it's along the Varsity line, and it isn't. It's carving through the countryside unnecessary, huge tunnelling at Chapel Hill near Haslingfield, doing massive damage to an Iron Age site. The routes are just wrong. They're expensive. They might run these diesel trains, they might not, they don't really know. They asked me to stop calling the embankment the Great Wall of Cambridge. And I said, well, your civil engineers called it that. And they said, yes, we told them off, but will you stop saying it because it's really making life difficult. So using existing railway infrastructure, yes. Carving through the countryside with these white elephant schemes, no.
Again, I'm gonna agree with Chris on this. So yeah, I love railways as well. I don't want to necessarily build lots of new railways because we'll end up with the same issue that we've got here in Coton, that we're going to carve through greenbelt land. So, you know, yeah, unfortunately we can't put back all the railways that we had, you know, what was it, 60 years ago. We can't put all those railways back. But, you know, I think light railway within the confines of the city is definitely a solution if those routes can be found. You know, if it's not light railway, then it should be electrification of the existing lines. That's really important as well. So yeah, love railways, but don't please carve up the rest of the country with them, like HS2.
If we're going to do railways, then I think we actually have to get better as a country in doing railways. I think it's an absolute disgrace, the fact that we haven't been able to build a railway in I don't know how long. We've lost the engineers, we've lost the project management capacity. It even looks like the two centres that produce the stock and the rails have told the government that after 8 months of being in discussion with them, they are now thinking moving out of the country because there is no supply chain ahead. So we're in a serious situation. So Chris, if it is a white elephant, I think it would be great if the government told it was white elephant. They've just said they're going ahead and there'll be a statutory consultation. So it would be good to know, because it's just chaos at the moment, and people whose lives and livelihoods and land and villages are going to be affected would like to know, this is real, how is it going to happen? And then your elected representative, what they will do is then work to mitigate that, within the due process that's around that. I do think it's very interesting to explore the light rail option, and I think it's really good that's kind of now seems to be back on the table. What I don't want, and I think by the end of this evening, is the need for public transport solutions has to be resolved. We can't have now more millions in feasibility studies for completely new schemes. That's why I'm calling for a public inquiry for C2C, so that it isn't a definite step in the next stage. The Secretary of State could just give this to the inspector to make a decision. I think the public inquiry should happen so that all of the evidence is on the table. We find out whether or not the on-road route, the pinch point around Madingley, which is the real issue here, is it possible to have the route on road and not affect Madingley Wood? We've heard from Madingley Cemetery, but not affect what is a protected designation. As I understand, the GCP have tried to avoid the damage of properties. It's about the properties on the other side of the road. So let's see, is there space? That's why I'd like to see it. I want to see transparency, because I read all the different sides say, let's have this debate in public so there's transparency and greater public confidence in the final decision made.
Pippa, thank you. I'm going to bring in James Littlewood, who's CEO of Cambridge Past, Present and Future, who's raised his hand there and been sitting very patiently writing notes. James?
I've been asked to truth check a few things, so just a couple of things on there. There is no need to take out property on Madeline Road in order to build our scheme. There isn't, no.
Okay.
And the second thing is there has to be a public inquiry because it requires compulsory passage of land, including land owned by Cambridge Past, Present and Future, and that can't be done without a public inquiry.
So it should happen.
It it will have to happen.
It will happen.
Yeah. Is there anything else, James, that's come out of this evening that raised your eyebrows? That
A few things.
That's for another event. There's going to be a follow-up event. Thank you. Thank you, James. We've probably got time for 2 more questions. Gentleman here in the grey sweater, microphone on the way.
Good evening. My question's around maintenance and operations. So anybody who's tried to drive out Manchester Road, there's some new unofficial speed restriction measures on the road. It's all just potholes. Anybody at the beginning of the year who tried to walk or cycle the direct route into town, for over a week that wasn't possible because it was flooded until I got my spade and dug out the ditch. And then the guided busway out towards St Ives and so on is currently flooded. What would you do to actually improve and maintain either the new route or the existing facilities so we can actually use what we have?
Okay, Pippa?
Yeah, so I think potholes is absolute travesty, and I think it's a state of the decline of the country, of complete lack of investment. So the money that comes into local councils for maintenance of the highways comes through central government.
Because this is a county council.
Yes, county council highways. So
maintenance.
it's just so the county council has put aside, you know, in its budget now 10 million. That means that's 10 million that doesn't go into the adult social care, you know, sort of black hole that needs more funding. But they've decided to put 10 million into, and they're doing prioritised highways maintenance on roads and pavements. But it's a drop in the ocean. It absolutely isn't enough. So what has to happen is that money has to come from central government to local councils for highways maintenance.
Okay,
that's something.
That question.
Yeah, I guess on this one, you could come back to HS2 as well. So my understanding was that the second part of HS2 was cancelled so that we could spend £14 billion on potholes instead. You know, that seems frankly bonkers, but you know, that's our government at the moment. Yeah, I mean, clearly there needs to be more investment in potholes, but yeah, I don't know. They just keep coming back. So yeah, I think it's like an infinite thing, isn't it? Maybe they just need to build better roads in the first place, and then we wouldn't have the potholes. I think that's probably the solution long term, but I guess no one's going to suggest that, are they? So.
Or modal shift. Good modal shift.
No, I think that's exactly what we're going to suggest, is how we fix them. That you're completely right. So the way in which the potholes are being fixed at the moment is a cheap temporary fix. Right. And people sort of said, well, you know, it's all the government's fault. Well, the county council is run by her party, and they're deciding where this money goes at the county council. They are responsible for this. And I do not believe that they're spending that money effectively. When I've spoken to the crews, there was one out in Sawston when I went on Politics East, and they pretty openly admitted that the way in which they're doing them is a cost-saving measure. They do it regularly, repeatedly, in the same location, and then the way they account for it is it looks like it's costing less money. If you were to actually, and yes, there is some disruption, but I think most of the people I talk to would welcome their road being closed for half a day if it meant a complete resurfacing. And some of the roads in the area where I live, they've done exactly that. And all the WhatsApp groups and all the Facebook groups, everyone said, this is outrageous. And then in the afternoon they went, oh, this is brilliant. We have a brand new
That's
road
how they're doing it.
that is fully
they are doing
fixed. But it's happening in a fraction of the cases.
Yeah.
And all of what you're driving on and all the punctures you're getting, and I'm running the Pothole Shocker of the Week. It's very glamorous running for Parliament. But we are posting pictures of the worst examples every week. And some of them are extremely dangerous. And we've actually got examples of people who've injured themselves in them, who have fallen both when walking and on cycles and have really hurt themselves. So it's a very serious issue.
Yeah, I've had the delight of dealing with potholes around my area. I mean, I was before I got my car, I cycled everywhere, and they were horrific then. Because obviously then they become very dangerous, because if you fall into one of them, you're off your bike, and that can really cause some severe injury. I mean, I had my car was I had to replace one of my tyres. I think within about 2 months of me buying my first car because of the potholes around the Cherry Hidden area. You know, from what I've been told from the county council and from the way this has been done, obviously, like we've been said, you know, government funding to local councils has been stripped quite considerably over the past 14 years, and that obviously has a massive detrimental effect. There are potholes everywhere. I mean, if I go back to South Gloucestershire just before it got turned over to a Rainbow Coalition in the most previous election, we still had a whole load of potholes around there. When it was a Conservative administration, they just seem to happen quite a lot, especially with heavier vehicles now and all these things. But one quick point on it. I've been told by members on the county council, and obviously, you know, they might chastise me if this is anything different. But the The problem at the moment is, obviously we are contracted, they contract with a private company to fill in certain potholes. They get paid at the minute on a per pothole basis. They get paid more by just filling in a patch, and that's part of the contract. That contract doesn't expire until 2025, and they're locked into it. It was a contract that was done under the previous Conservative County Council administration. That's the problem, one of the big problems we have at the moment. Again, I can't remember if it's incorrect, I'll get shouted at by members of the County Council, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. I've checked it a couple of times. So there are things we can do, and hopefully in 2025, when that contract comes up for renewal, that will make things a little bit easier, and it means that I can drive around and not have to go to a tyre replacement place.
Okay, thank you, thank you. We're going to have to draw the evening to a close. I just want to give the representatives and candidates an opportunity, just in a minute, if you can please. I'll allow a minute and a half, but a minute. Just to return to C2C. And just to tell the audience, just to underline where you stand on C2C, but also maybe if your view from what you've heard this evening from each other and our guests in the audience, if your viewpoint has changed at all. Luke.
Before I move on to that, can I just say thank you to everyone for coming out tonight and for everyone for hosting this. Again, I said Anna for letting me view the orchard and go through all that. It's been a really great event. This is actually my first public hustings I've ever done, so it was a bit of a nerve-wracking thing coming here, but it's been very relaxing. Everyone's been so kind. All the questions have been very poignant, and it's been a really, really good evening. So thank you very, very much for that. You know, I go back to what I said at the beginning, really, which is we need sustainable transport, absolutely. And my big thing, the thing I've been trying to echo for so long within my party, is light rail. We've heard it so much tonight, but again, I come back to if we want light rail, you need the infrastructure in place. You can't just put it on a road. It needs to have viable infrastructure. And I do see this as a piece of the puzzle where we can actually get some tangible light rail in the future, and it will make a big, big difference for the people who live in Camborne and a big, big difference for the people who live in Cambridge, and there's a lot of them. So that's where I stand, that's where I'm at, and hopefully we can get seeing some things being done and moving in the future, because this has been quite a long process in the making.
Luke, thank you. Luke Finer for the Labour Party. Chris Carter Chapman.
So thank you, echoing what Luke has said there, to everyone who's come out to hear what we have to say tonight. We've covered a lot of issues, lots of them are nuanced, there are different positions, different facts and figures you've heard. None of them are as clear-cut as why we are primarily here tonight, and that is C2C. And we're talking about the public inquiry, and we're talking about all the evidence to come. The evidence is already there. It is a terribly bad scheme. It is really bad value for money. It costs far too much taxpayers' money when the alternative is so much cheaper, so much more efficient, and doesn't lead to the destruction of an ancient orchard. We owe it to the next generation. They say that you plant trees for the next generation. Well, we owe it to the people who planted those trees to safeguard their work. We owe it to our local environment and our local communities to stand up and be clear on where we all stand on this. And I went through the votes earlier tonight. It's very clear-cut where each political party stands on this issue and how they voted when they were confronted with all the evidence, the public opinion, the ratio of people who wanted it and didn't want it, and all the financial reality. So if I'm your MP, we will not rest until we save Coton Orchard.
Oliver Fisher for the Greens.
Yeah, so I just want to say thank you for the people coming tonight, but also the video tonight. I thought that was absolutely amazing. I think it highlighted all of the issues in such a kind of very poignant way, and the beautiful scenes of nature and animals in the orchard, etc. So that was fantastic. I think the scheme as it stands is not a good scheme. I am supportive of the fact that there is a scheme, but I just don't think cutting across the orchard is a good idea. And we have to explore the alternative routes. So yeah, that's why.
And finally, Pippa, have you changed or amended your opinion that you shared with us, that you were supportive of the idea as it stands?
No, I think what's really important is in the room tonight are two groups, and very, very important, that aren't here represented. And one, that's young people and families that are living on the fringes and who are absolutely dependent on public transport and high quality public transport now. The other is nature. It's nature and biodiversity that's being brought into the room by all of you and by the film and by the campaigns that you're running. The next process, so I'm not one for cutting consultations short in the middle, for stopping due process. The next stage in the decision making is with the Secretary of State for a Transport Works Order. What's really good has been corrected, so there has to be a public inquiry. And in that public inquiry, I will be making representation. I don't think this should be any more treated like a public political football. What we need is, things have been said in documents that are being challenged. I want to see that brought out into the public domain. And I want, therefore, the evidence to be looked at to see particularly, I think it all rests in the end on that pinch point around Madingley as to whether this part is on-road and off-road. And I want to see that with public voices heard, with all the evidence forward in that public inquiry, because that's the last stage. That's what I'd like to see.
Pippa Haling's there from the That draws to a conclusion our evening. It just leaves me to say a few thank yous. Firstly, and I'll just go through the candidates just so you know exactly what it was you heard from. Pippa Halings, who's the prospective parliamentary candidate for the Lib Dems. Thank you. Thanks also to Oliver Fisher, who is the candidate for the Green Party. To Chris Carter-Chapman, who is the candidate for the Conservatives. And thanks also to Luke Viner, who is representing the Labour Party this evening. My thanks to CBAG, to the Coton Busway Action Group for putting on this wonderful event this evening. Will the video be available so we can all go back and watch it again?
Watch the whole thing again.
Yeah. So thank you very much indeed to everyone who's put this on. Most importantly, from my perspective, thank you for turning out this evening, being very well behaved as well. I think one of the best behaved audiences I've ever been in an event like this. So thank you very much indeed, because as I mentioned, it shows that you care and you're very passionate about the environment, about biodiversity, about what happens in your neighbourhoods and your communities. So thank you very much indeed for taking the time. So I know we're all busy, so thank you for turning out this evening. And have a nice evening, what's left of it, well, bedtime really, but drive safely as well, and thank you. Bye-bye.
And thank you, Jeremy.
It's a lot easier when you have a custodian.
It is a very nice accent.